Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. I'm calling the meeting to order. Do we have any regrets, Madam Clerk?
No, we have no regrets this evening.
All right. Well, perhaps the councillor will join us in progress. Council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Thank you. Would two of you like to move and second us into committee of the whole? Councillor Robinson, Councillor Dudek, all in favor? Opposed, if any? We are now resolved into committee of the whole. We have no consent items. We have no confidential consent items. And our first item is the public hearing item, the public meeting for the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for the Dunbar Developments project. And as we always point out, this is not a decision matter. This is an information gathering matter. It will be followed by a recommendation and a decision at another time, after staff have had enough time to properly consider the information we received tonight. And with that, I'll turn to the planner, Gabe Charles, the manager of current planning, and he will synopsize for the public's benefit the report that council has. Mr. Charles, we're all ears.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of Council, this is a statutory public meeting for an application by Dunbar Developments for amendments to the town's official plan and zoning bylaw. The subject lands are located on the west side of Trafalgar Road, just south of Glen Ashton. The total site is composed of 4 individual properties totaling 1.65 hectares. There were 3 houses on 4 of those properties, 2 of which have since been removed. Just for context, across Trafalgar Road there is an existing residential neighborhood. Directly north is a daycare as well as a dental office. South of the property there's a detached dwelling, a dog kennel, and a place of worship. And on the west side is what is currently vacant land, but there is a draft approved plan of subdivision known as the Kilberry subdivision just to the west, which includes 52 single detached lots. So the proposal itself, as I noted, is to amend the town's official plan and the zoning bylaw with the intent of redesignating the subject site from low-density residential to high-density and change the zoning from agriculture to multi-attached residential zone. The proposal includes 114 4-story townhouses on common element lanes. The density is 70 units per hectare. The applicant proposes to access the subject lands from the future municipal road, which will be located on the west side, and which is being constructed through the Kilberry subdivision. Currently, the site is designated low-density residential in the official plan, has a maximum permitted density of 29 units per hectare. The 70 units per hectare that's being proposed is considered high-density residential in the livable Oakville plan. As well, Trafalgar Road is classified as a busway corridor, and section 26.32 in the town's official plan identifies the Trafalgar Road study, and this study is intended to evaluate the current land use designation between Dundas and the QEW to identify some opportunities for intensification as well, ensure there is coordination with the future transit improvements along Trafalgar Road. The zoning of the site is currently agricultural, and the proposal is for an R8 residential zone, which would be more appropriate for townhouses. Some comments have been received from circulated departments and agencies as well as the public at the public information meeting. These include conformity with the official plan, compatibility with surrounding uses, impacts to future development on adjacent lots, the affordability of residential units, transportation impacts on road improvements, site design, and design of the units themselves. Timing of the application, recommendation report in conjunction with the Trafalgar Road corridor study and stormwater management. And complete analysis of these items will be addressed in a subsequent report to Council. In terms of the next steps, staff will continue to evaluate the application as well as review comments from the public as well as departments and agencies and provide that analysis in the next report. The timing of that future report has not yet been confirmed. If there are any questions, I'd be pleased to answer those now.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Council, are there questions for Mr. Charles? Thank you. Are there listed delegations?
Yes, we have one listed delegation, Mr. Billy Tung from KLM Planning Partners, Inc.
Mr. Tung, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Hi, you're welcome. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Billy Tung. I am the planning consultant representing Dunbar Development, the applicant for this application. Well, I'm here to take any questions you may have from council and from the public if there are any questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there other delegations?
No further delegations listed.
Are there any members of the public with information for council on this matter here? Ma'am, would you come up and identify yourself for the clerk, please? And you have up to 10 minutes.
Okay, well, I won't take that long.
Right.
My name is Loretta Serafini, and together with my spouse, we own the property known municipally as 2136 Trafalgar Road, and we carry on business there as Wagaway. For those of you who are not native to Oakville, you may be interested to know that Wagaway has been present there and carrying on business there as a kennel for over 60 years. So, looking around members of council, I think it's fairly safe to say that I speak for everyone, possibly, when I say Wagaway is older than all of us. Anyway, when I was a little girl, I remember driving by and seeing it there. And, of course, the town of Oakville looked a lot different then than it does today. But I guess change is, can't be stopped. It's coming, so we have to anticipate that. We're a lawful business. We pay property taxes and business taxes to the town of Oakville. Additionally, we are inspected annually, and we meet and exceed all the requirements as prescribed by the town of Oakville's bylaw pertaining to pet shops and kennels. We employ 6 people full-time and anywhere from 4 to 10 people part-time. And we provide a needed and worthwhile service for the people of the town of Oakville and their pets. Nevertheless, we're concerned. We are concerned about this development and the development that is happening immediately to the west of us. We're concerned that our business, our contribution to the commerce of the town of Oakville will be affected by the new residents moving in. People who pay in excess of $1 million for their homes have a certain expectation with respect to the enjoyment of their homes, particularly quiet enjoyment of their homes. And so it's reasonable to believe that they will not be pleased to be our new neighbors once they realize that our business does generate noise, especially on a quiet Sunday morning. So you too should be concerned. Members of council should be concerned. The staff should be concerned that they will be receiving phone calls and complaints from these folks that are not happy to be disturbed. Accordingly, I think that there should be no surprises in the minds of these new purchasers about what to anticipate. And I think that there's some things that we can do at this point to mitigate any problems that may arise. Namely, I believe that the town of Oakville should require the builder and the developer to include acknowledgement clauses in the agreements of purchase and sale so that these new residents can hear from their lawyers firsthand that there is a kennel situated very close to the development, and they can anticipate the noise that goes along with a kennel. But I also think that council can require something else as well from the builders and the developers of both these properties. Namely, they can require that these companies install noise abatement equipment or noise abatement systems around the perimeter of our property. I think it's reasonable to expect this of them. They are going to be earning millions of dollars from the construction and sale of these homes, these townhomes and these homes. And I think it's reasonable for the town to ask them to install noise abatement fencing or something like that that would help to contain the noise and help to protect the new residents from disruption and allow them to enjoy their new properties in peace. I think also members of this council and town staff should be interested in demonstrating to the new residents that they are committed to creating a livable community where current existing businesses can operate, new businesses can operate, and where they can also enjoy quiet enjoyment of their properties. I think that personally, we feel that the zoning is high. There are traffic issues on Trafalgar Road. As it stands, a lot of our customers risk their lives making left-hand turns into our property. And I know you're going to be redirecting the traffic onto that, the road that's projected to be immediately to the west of our property. But that will also bring increased traffic onto that stretch of Trafalgar Road immediately in front of our property. So I would encourage you to be careful about your densities and have a little bit of concern for the traffic patterns on that road. I also would encourage you, and actually beseech you, to ensure that any construction that happens on Trafalgar Road does not interfere with the conduct of our business. We also own a property on Dundas Street, and this summer was horrible because they were installing a sewer along Dundas, and the disruption to our business was absolutely unbelievable. Even though I had daily conversations with the contractor, such things as putting pylons in the middle of the road, preventing our customers from entering and exiting our driveway, to just obstructing our property. It was really quite egregious. And so I would ask you and the town staff to ensure, and the regional staff perhaps as well, to ensure that those kinds of disruptions don't happen with this project. That's it.
Thank you very much for the information.
You're
You've
welcome.
prompted several questions, beginning with Councillor Dudek, and then Councillor Khan, and then Councillor Elgar.
Okay,
Who
sure.
knows what else might happen after that?
Your
Councillor
Worship,
Knoll as well.
given that it's in Councillor Knoll's ward, I'll defer my questions till after he's had a chance.
All right, the next one is Councillor Khan. Councillor Elgar, do you yield as well?
It's fine.
I know, I'm working with you here, but Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, thank you for coming. What kind of noise abatement are you asking for?
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert in the field, but I know that properties, for example, along the QEW and along busy roadways, install fences and barriers that assist in mitigating noise. And right now, we have a solid wood fence. I think it's 5 feet tall. I really don't, if you look at how close some of these properties are going to be coming to the kennel, I don't think that they're really going to help much in mitigating any kind of noise. So I think that town should consider, asking these developers to install fences similar to those that line the QEW. I mean, if these people buying, $1.25 million, I think they should be able to sit outside on their patio on a Sunday morning and enjoy a cup of coffee, but I don't think they're going to be able to do that. Our dogs bark on Sunday morning. There's no traffic. There's no other sounds to muffle our noise that we generate, and the noise carries. We have, over the years, we have tried to, do things in such a way as to prevent on a Sunday morning these noises, especially out of deference to the people that attend church services right next door to us. For example, we don't open our business till noon on Sunday because we want to keep the barking and the traffic to a minimum out of respect for parishioners of that church. There's trees between our property and the Sisters of Charity and the church is some distance away from our property. So they do hear barking, but it's not really disruptive. That's not going to happen with the property that these folks are suggesting, or the property that the building that's going to be happening right to the immediate west of us. I mean, you can throw a stone between our property and the first house. So it's going to be quite disruptive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Knoll.
Well, first of all, thanks for the courtesy extended to me by Councillors Duddick and Khan. That was very kind. My first, and I should have, if Alan had given me the same courtesy, then I would have asked the same question. So, but it's good. But my second question is, how far is your kennel on the property itself? Where is this situated on the property? Like the pens?
It's to the rear of the property. In fact, our kennel building is about, I would say, 10 feet from the rear lot line, the most westerly boundary of our property.
Right.
And if you consider that that's to the building, but we have what are called runs, outside runs off of the building that bring a dog probably within 3 or 4 feet from the property line on a typical day that could be barking.
Right.
So.
But your kennel is essentially adjacent to the proposed road that is being built in the Kilberry development behind.
Correct.
What would the distance be between the proponent's property line and your kennel?
The proponent
Roughly.
being Campar
Dunbar.
or Dumpar?
Yeah.
If there's a property, there's actually an existing 1 acre property that separates our property from
Right.
the boundary of their property. I'm going to say, I don't know, 60 feet.
Okay.
What's the frontage of that property? What's the frontage? I don't know.
I'm not sure, but roughly 60 feet.
60,
Okay.
70 feet, I don't know, something like that. From the side.
So that's the question. That's my first question. Have you had any, or second question, Alan took my first. Have you had any noise complaints up to this point from, I know you're a bit of a distance and there are woods between you and the kennel now, or between you and the closest homes on Meadowland. But have you had noise complaints from your?
Very, very few.
Okay.
In the 14 years that I've owned that business, we've had very, very few. And they tend to happen on Sunday morning because there's no traffic, there's no other sounds to muffle the sound of a dog barking. But I must note that until very recently, there was a forest behind our property. And with all the, trees and bushes and shrubs that catch the noise and prevent it from carrying directly to the homes that are on the other side. That has now disappeared, of course. And so I would think that those residents on the other side are hearing a lot more noise today than they would have 6 months ago. You can check the town's own records too, because I do believe that complaints also come into the town, but not very many have.
I've never heard of one in my 12 years here, so it's.
We do our best.
Yeah, clearly.
But it's going to get worse.
Yeah. Your Worship, my other question is actually to staff, because I want to follow up on, because I'm trying to refresh my memory on how we dealt with Kilberry on this same issue, because I remember this came up at that time, because you and your husband delegated at that point. So I guess we'll allow the cycle to happen, and then when it's over, if with your indulgence, I'd like to ask staff some questions.
Of course you can. And by the way, you're aware this is the public information meeting, not a recommendation or
Oh,
decision
yeah,
meeting.
absolutely. And the main reason I wanted to ask staff questions is because I just wanted to ask them to potentially bring back some additional information on that experience with the subsequent report.
I imagine they've already made a note to do that, but we'll certainly let you do that. Councillor Duddick?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So basically, in a nutshell, in addition to the noise concerns you have, you're more or less concerned about the continued use of your business on that property, given that you've been a long-standing business situated there, albeit that the surrounding lands are changing in use. You're just wanting to protect, and understandably so, that you're not going to get future complaints, that you're not going to have concerns that are not of your making, but rather of somebody on a neighboring property being concerned that you're using the property the way you are. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I also, the third issue would be disruption to our business during the construction process.
Okay. I do think that maybe Mr. Lambert and his department might be able to assist in that regard. I know quite often we have construction plans that are dealt with at the onset of something, and certainly you flagged that for them, so I think that
Thank
might... but the other thing, maybe at the appropriate time with staff, I'd also like to ask in terms of what we can do on title. I know that Councillor Knoll had raised a similar concern for a property in my ward, that when there's an existing use of a property, a business, and you're trying to change use abutting it, there should be some protection so that that business can still be ongoing without having to be, what shall I say, under the microscope in terms of people.
Thank you. Anything like that would be appreciated.
Councillor Khan?
Thank you very much. Have you in the past, even before this application came to fruition, have you considered putting a noise abatement wall before? And do you know what the cost of that would be?
We actually installed one. When we purchased that property 14 years ago, it was simply a chain link fence. And so we, of our own devices, installed a solid wood fence, 5 or 6 feet tall, that helped contain the noise, also provided additional security around the perimeter of our property. But as I told Councillor Knoll, noise has not been a problem for us. We were proactive, but really it has not been a problem for us up until this point.
And so you suspect that if there's a wall that's a little bit higher or made of different material, it might be more effective?
Correct.
Your Worship, I just have a question for the representative from Dunbar, if I may. He offered to answer any questions.
Why don't we wait until we've finished with this delegation?
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Serafini? Thank you very much for your
Thank you very much.
Mr. Tung, Councillor Khan would like to ask you a question.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. You heard the discussion, and I'm just wondering whether or not Dunbar has put their mind to this issue, whether or not this concern's been raised before, and if you have any thoughts on this.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair. As part of our submission for the various applications before you tonight, one of the submission requirements was for a noise attenuation study. And as part of that study, our noise consultant was well aware and took into account the kennel use, the existing kennel use that is about 40 meters away from our most southern property line. So there's a 1 acre lot in between our proposal and the existing use, and my client is well aware of the fact that there are concerns expressed by the owner of the existing kennel, and have no no issues or concerns with putting into a purchase and sale agreement a warning clause notifying purchasers of the existing use, and that noise may potentially come from that kennel. So my client has no concerns about putting that into their purchase and sale agreement.
I I appreciate that, but that's mostly lawyering, saying, you know, we're not liable, you know what's going on. But what about actually remedying the situation? Have you put, your mind to that?
Well, the noise, the noise attenuation report also stated mitigation measures that could be put forth. Not just the noise from, I mean, this environmental noise for the development, and the way townhouses are designed, there are design measures that can be done to the building to ensure that noise does not get into the unit, or a certain height of fences are put up so that noise, again, will be mitigated in people's backyards and amenity space. So those have been incorporated into the site design.
Know that you haven't closed the door to suggestions that have been made by the kennel owner that perhaps putting in, and maybe we're getting far ahead, but you're still open to suggestions at this time and working with your neighbors to make sure that there's kind of a peaceful process through this application.
Right, yes, correct. We've gone the step of agreeing to put the warning clauses into the purchase and sale agreement, and we'll take any measures that will come out of our noise consultant and the town's review of our noise attenuation report, if there are any recommendations that are needed to be taken further from what's been submitted today.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Councillor Knoll?
Thank you. With respect to your noise attenuation study, what other significant transmitters are there identified in that report? So there's the dog kennel. Was there anything else significant in terms of noise?
It's really the most significant being the road noise from Trafalgar,
right,
and the future road noise from Trafalgar.
So that was more substantial than the dog kennel?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And what sort of measures is your client intending to take with respect to the dealing with the noise impacts from Trafalgar? Any construction design, I guess, techniques in order to mitigate noise?
Right. The building designs have been evaluated by the noise consultant, and again, there will be clauses in the warning clauses about the type of glazing material that's to be used for the windows and the amount of openings along that wall. So again, there are design measures that have been taken into consideration for those buildings to attenuate noise from Trafalgar.
So theoretically then, that noise attenuation program, the construction issues with respect to glazing and openings, that would also have an impact on it, on mitigating the impacts, I would assume, from the dog kennel as well?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Thank you, Mr. Tong. Are there any other members of the public with information for council on this matter? Seeing none, I'll confine it to table. Councillor Knoll, did you want to ask questions of staff?
Sure, thank you. I won't actually go into great detail because this is coming back, but staff have heard that I'm interested in knowing more about a refresher on the Kilberry issue, and add to that list as well, I guess any kind of research or information on the impact or the success rate of attenuating or mitigating the impact of animal noise such as that, because I know we've had this come up a few times in the years. I don't need a response to it today, but if that could be part of the report that comes back, I'd appreciate it. The one question I do have for today, and I'd appreciate a response: do we have a warning clause in the Kilberry subdivision agreement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's a number of warning clauses, not the least of which is one that does refer specifically to the presence of the kennel nearby. Okay,
that's great. Thank you very much. Look forward to the upcoming report, and when the time is appropriate, I'll give you a motion.
I think we're there.
Then I'll give you the, I'm sorry. Okay. Will you yield to me again? I will give you a motion to receive the report as has been printed in the agenda tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Any discussion, other questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. All right, that brings us to discussion item right. So this is the same item that we've already considered on September 10th. There's and we basically lifted it from the table at the October 29th council meeting, and so it's now properly before you. And the chair will recognize Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Actually, before you, you should have a part 3 to the recommendation in our bundle tonight, which we would like to, Councillor Lapworth and I would like to add. And we'd like to take it so that the bottom floor of the development would be commercial. But as far as the widths of the streets, we've met with Julia from the Chamber, and she thinks that the town and staff have done a good job and that they look forward to it going forward with the widths that have been proposed. So I'm in favor of it based on the Chamber's recommendations also, and thank staff for the due diligence.
So the recommendation in 3 parts is moved by Councillor Elgar and seconded by, and we don't need a seconder, but any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. That brings us to number 3, which is a recommendation report on 112 Ulster Drive, and I'll just call your attention, Council, to the November 12th memo from planning on this matter. And if you give your attention to our senior planner, Robert Dunn, Councillor Johnston.
Do we need a presentation?
Well, I believe he just wants to update you on the,
Okay.
on the changes. And I thought the new developments might, let the public understand it by having the senior planner explain it. Mr. Thun,
Shorten it.
we and the public are all ears.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Burton, members of council. As you're aware, a zoning bylaw amendment application was submitted by William and Maureen Brown for 112 Ulster. The effect of the application was to facilitate a future severance of the lot to create 1 additional lot. The application is being discussed as item 3 tonight and can be found on page 25. It is a recommendation report tonight, and just for council's information, you should be aware that the application, the zoning bylaw amendment, and the associated consent application have been appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board on November 8th. That is last Thursday. As I mentioned, the applicant wishes to rezone 112 Ulster Drive from RO2 to RO3 to facilitate this severance. The slide that is before you right now highlights the larger existing lot, the retained lot and the proposed lots, the existing zoning, both the for the area, the RO3 to the north, Special Provision 22, and the RO2 to the south, including the existing lot right now, and also the proposed RO3 for the 2 lots that are part of this severance application. The zoning amendment application. The existing dwelling is to remain, and the applicant is proposing to build a 2-story dwelling on the severed lot. Within the agenda and the report, this slide outlines the regulations associated with the proposal. Those can be found on page 28 of the agenda or page 4 of the staff report. As can be seen, the applicant is proposing a retained lot with a lot area of approximately 615 square meters, with the proposed severed lot being approximately 564 square meters. The respective lot frontages are 20 meters, 20.1 meters, and 18.48 meters. The Livable Oakville Plan governs development of the site, as it does this municipality. The site is contained within a stable residential community. The site is designated as low-density residential. Staff within the report have highlighted various policies from Livable Oakville. These can be found on page 30 of the agenda or page 6 of the staff report. The intent of these policies is critical in that it maintains and protects the existing character of the neighborhood. With regards to zoning, this slide highlights the existing zoning for the property. It is RO2. It also identifies the zoning around the subject site. And for council's information, the line between the RO2 and the RO3 just to the north is the northerly property limit for the subject property. So that is between 112 Ulster and 120 Ulster. There has been public engagement with regards to this application. A public information meeting was held on November 8th, 2012, together with a statutory public meeting on April 10th, 2012. Members of the public attended both of those meetings. The main public concern expressed at both of these meetings was that the proposal did not reflect the existing character of the area. These public comments received or as part of the application reflected this concern. The lotting pattern for the associated subdivision of which 112 Ulster is part of was established in 1965. I have in the report provided you with a copy of Plan 1324. It basically reflects the yellow highlighted lotting pattern that is on the air photo today. This plotting pattern has remained stable since that time. The built form in the area is single detached dwellings. That is the same as being proposed by this application for the severed lot. In looking at the overhead or the slide, 3 areas exist within the neighborhood. Lots fronting onto Lakeshore Road and on the periphery of the neighborhood. Then there are lots fronting onto the straight sections of Salmon Road and also Ulster Drive. And finally, there are lots fronting on the offset cul-de-sac of Ulster Drive. As stated previously, livable Oakville policies identify intensification requiring the maintenance and protection of the existing neighborhood character to ensure the stability. Based on the analysis that staff have undertaken as outlined in the staff report, the proposal does not satisfy the intensification policies or the evaluative criteria found in sections 11.18, 11.19, or section 28, which are the consent policies for the livable Oakville plan. In conclusion, Your Worship, staff put forth the following recommendation as outlined on the overhead and also the memo that has been distributed to Council prior to this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. Questions for Mr. Thun? Thank you very much, Mr. Thun. Are there members of the public here who have information for Council on this matter? Seeing none. Do I see any? I see one maybe. Well, please come down and introduce yourself, and then we welcome your participation in the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and Council. I'm one of the residents on the court, 105 Ulster Drive, just for reference. My name is Troy Wilson. I just had a clarification just on procedure, because I was surprised that the application was appealed to the OMB. As part of, it wasn't part of information I received until I saw it today, but my assumption is that council had to pass the recommendation and then you'd appeal, or was the decision ratified beforehand? I'm confused with the OMB and the fact that the Browns have appealed to the OMB, but I thought the decision hadn't been made yet by council. So I'm curious about how that process works.
I'll give you the lay interpretation, and then I'll ask the town solicitor to give you the legal interpretation. But they're within their rights to appeal before we make a decision. In certain cases, when, for example, we haven't made a decision within 180 days from the time of a complete application, for example.
Okay.
And in those circumstances, you might read the decision to appeal before we make a decision as a prediction or a forecast on their part,
right,
to our decision. And Ms. Huckwith, perhaps you'd like to, actually she's indicating we can't improve on that.
Okay. All right.
That's a first for me.
Well, as I say, and understanding the fact that it is 180 days, because if you appeal, I'm saying in my perspective, it could be a foreshadow of the decision, but also the fact that I know it's expensive, or I've learned through the process that it's expensive for any town council to spend taxpayers' money supporting their decisions at council within the OMB as well. So. Well,
we spent a considerable amount more than that creating the Livable Oakville plan, one of whose main thrusts was to establish protection for stable, established neighborhoods. So we kind of have to defend it.
No, I agree, and if you saw me at the last council meeting, I praised you at the fact that the Livable Oakville is a great progressive way in which you can take ownership of the development of the town of Oakville in the future, which I think is great. So it was I think the decision's a good one, personally, that you've actually lived up to that standard that you've set. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. All right, anyone else? Well, then I'll confine it to table and I'll look to council for a motion. Councillor Johnston.
I'm happy to move the revised recommendation by staff.
Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. That brings us to the Memorial Gardens Canada Limited application at 3164 9th Line. And if we give our attention to Charles McConnell, our Manager of Senior Planning. Councillor Adams.
This is the kind of intensification we're willing to live with, and we'll move the staff recommendation if there's no need for it, for the presentation, that is.
Are there members of the public here with information for council on this matter? Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Councillor Adams has moved the recommendation. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed, if any, and it is carried. Intensification, yes, I wouldn't have thought of it that way, but there you go. That brings us to item number 5 on our agenda, which is the Merton Planning Study. And if we give our attention to our planning director,
I don't know what just happened.
Ms. Dana Anderson, she will walk us through this and edify the public at the same time. Ms. Anderson, we're all ears.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I'm pleased to present an overview of an item referred to as the Merton QEW Brawny Road Study this evening, which can be found on page 51 of your agenda. The context for this study lies within livable Oakville, but in terms of the study area, this study is the study lands are identified as being located at Brawny Road and QEW in the town of Oakville. And the outline here provides you with an indication of the study lands. The majority of the study lands are within what is referred to as the Parkway Belt area and includes 14 Mile Creek. And I'll walk you through some of the key land uses that exist today in the study area. I did want to make note that in your report, you'll see this small area just on the west side of Bronte Road that actually is excluded from the map in your report, but is actually included within the study area. So we will make that correction as we go forward with the study. There are 2 or 3 major landowners within the study area. Infrastructure Ontario, formerly known as the Ontario Realty Corporation, own a significant portion of land in and around the 14 Mile Creek. The region of Halton owns 2 large parcels of land, including the regional facilities and the Mid-Halton Water Treatment Center. The Infrastructure Ontario also own what is referred to as the Deerfield Golf Course, and that's subject to a long-term lease under Infrastructure Ontario. And also within the study area is the Saw-Wet Golf Course, and there are a number of other individual properties. So just to highlight some of the key properties within the area, as I mentioned, the Saw-Wet Golf Course, the study area is approximately 234 hectares, and the Saw-Wet Golf Course provides for a significant portion of those lands. And it is currently operating and has recently been purchased by a company referred to as the Bronte Green Corporation. Also, as you know, the white oak tree is a designated property within the subject area at 1179 Bronte Road. And as I mentioned, the region's facilities, including their regional facilities, as well as the Halton Regional Police facility just to the north of the region's town hall. Also, the Deerfield Golf Course, which is currently operating, and the Merton Mount Pleasant Cemetery, which is immediately to the south of the North Service Road. Also, the Mid-Halton Wastewater Treatment Center, and the Hilton Family Farm, which is also a designated property. Just to the north are lands we refer to in the study as the third line lands. This is a portion of the lands owned by Infrastructure Ontario, which is on the east side of the 14 Mile Creek. And within the area, there are also lands owned by the town and lands that are leased by the town from Infrastructure Ontario. And there's currently a lease agreement with respect to those lands, which has a notification for any termination of the lease, required notice of approximately 6 years. And finally, as I mentioned, the Infrastructure Ontario lands. And within this area is the significant portion of the natural heritage system that follows the 14 Mile Creek corridor. In addition, there are a number of individual rural properties on the west side of Bronte Road, including a fairly large property we refer to as the Enns property, and a number of additional listed properties under the Oakville Heritage Registrar. In terms of policies and histories for this area, there is a significant amount of policy history in terms of how these lands are designated and in the past have come out of what's referred to as the Parkway Belt West Plan. You'll see the land area at this location at Bronte Road in the QEW. Under the Region of Halton's official plan, these lands are currently designated as urban and natural heritage system. And that is under the Regional Official Plan Amendment 38, which is before the Municipal Board. However, under the existing plan, a portion of the lands, which is saw-wet, are designated as urban, with the majority still being under the Parkway Belt West Plan and the Natural Heritage System. Under Oakville's Livable Oakville Plan, the approved designation for these lands in the urban structure map is, as I mentioned, urban for the saw wetlands, which is actually identified as part of the residential urban lands. And the Parkway Belt West still remains on the majority of the property, including the existing developed properties by the region. And I will get to the specific land uses in a moment. Under the land use designations in Livable Oakville, you'll see this area that contains saw-wet. This is identified as private open space, and the majority of those lands are what I refer to as the saw-wet lands. Again, the remainder of the lands are designated under the Parkway Belt West Plan. There is, however, within Livable Oakville, a section that refers to special policy areas, and this is outlined in the report. And it does identify that in implementing land use policies for this area, there is a need to provide comprehensive study. And it recognizes that during the course of the plan, this would occur, and these lands are identified as potential future development. So there is a requirement, and it's set out in terms of what is required to develop these lands in order for future development to occur. And that is found in section 26 of the Livable Oakville Plan. Having said that, within the Livable Oakville Plan, there is a clearly defined natural heritage system that is identified along the 14 Mile Creek. And it's the intent within the study that this area will be maintained, protected, and in fact enhanced through any future development of the area. So in terms of the study process itself, there are 3 key steps that are outlined in the report. And these are required to identify appropriate land use and policies for the study area lands for future development. And the overall study is intended to be undertaken with a defined set of objectives, which are listed in page 61 in your agenda, in addition to all of the Livable Oakville policies. And some of the key objectives, as I mentioned, are protecting and enhancing the natural heritage system, the protection of opportunities for employment land along the QEW corridor, and also the continued protection and maintenance of the heritage resources within this area. As part of the study, there's also an indication that there should be some key determinants, which in addition to appropriate land use and policies includes determining the appropriate infrastructure and facilities required to accommodate any development in this area. In terms of the 3 steps, the first being a significant amount of background work and technical studies that needs to be undertaken. The town is currently working with the Region of Halton and Conservation Halton, as well as the major landowners, to define a terms of reference for those studies. Those studies are also intended to be peer-reviewed by a consultant retained by the town to ensure all of the town's requirements are met through those studies. The second key step in the process is to develop and identify the developable area within the study lands, and to identify options for land uses within those areas, given all of the background work and analysis by staff. Developing what's referred to as a tertiary plan to identify those land use options. This part of the study will also, with any study within Oakville, require consultation and engagement with the public and various groups, and will also involve an analysis of those options to develop a preferred option. And finally, the results from the study will be a recommendation report to Council on an official plan amendment, which will provide recommended land use designations and associated policies based on the preferred option. And I should note that the major landowners do intend to provide additional information with respect to some specific properties within the study area concurrently with this study, and those may come forward in the form of additional amendments at a future date or as part of the staff recommendation, and this will be dependent on timing and the level of study required for some of those specific properties. And as you know, some of them are tied to the need to remove the Parkway Belt designation from the regional plan, and as a result of that being, ROPA 38 being appealed to the board, that may defer the timing on some of the implementation. So that's a very brief overview, and I'd be very pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I think there may be some. I'd like to ask you, for the public's benefit, if you could just help everyone understand what is a study. It's actually planning jargon, and the average person won't understand what is a study and what is its significance in the planning regime.
So the current study's origin is within the Livable Oakville Plan.
All right, so back up to what a study is anyway.
So in this particular case, the study is to identify all of the basically constraints and limitations for this area, and then based on the developable area that is available, what is the most appropriate land use and associated policies for those lands, and not just within the context of the local area, but in the context of the town as a whole. So the intent for this study is to carry out those steps to come to that recommendation to include a land use designation for these lands as part of Livable Oakville.
And is a study, therefore, the foundation or even the evidence that supports a later recommendation to council?
That's correct.
And of these steps, these 3 stages that you outlined, where do appeal rights exist? For example, can a study be appealed?
Not until the actual amendment that staff would put forward to council would there be an opportunity for an appeal, because that amendment would come through the process of a staff-initiated amendment to Livable Oakville. So depending on council's decision, landowners or members of the public could consider that, and if they have participated in the process, could appeal that official plan amendment. The study itself also, it's important to note, one of the key determinants I mentioned is that individual applications could also come forward on their own merits. However, the intent of the study is to bring all of those potential individual interests together, including the public interest and the town's interest, to ensure that what we put forward is in the interest of the town.
And finally, could you, for the public's benefit, explain the reasonably expected amount of time that each of those 3 stages consumes? How long do these things take?
The level that we are recommending for the tertiary plan is a land use designation with associated policies. So we are looking through the study process of approximately a year from today to be coming back to council with a recommendation. I know if the landowners are here, they're going to be looking to have that at a much faster pace, as they do with all development applications. But I think the importance is that is our target, to complete the study within a year. However, we will take as much time as is needed given the consultation process required and issues that may arise through the study may be extended.
So the first 2 steps consume a year?
The recommendation to council is intended to come forward within a year. So each of the steps together would be a one-year process.
Okay, so.
But that's understanding that all of the technical work that has been undertaken to date will be reviewed without significant issue. And we know that there are many issues that come up that need to be reconsidered. There may be a requirement for several resubmissions on the technical work. Until we get underway, it's difficult to ascertain the exact timing, but we're targeting for 1 year.
And are you familiar with the communication we received from Oakville Green?
Yes.
And did you notice, I want to call your attention to the part where they talk about how some wildlife studies have to be done at proper times of year?
Yes.
And this way, all of that would be accommodated?
Yes, and my understanding is we are continuing to work with Conservation Halton in the region to ensure that the appropriate studies have been undertaken or are going to be undertaken. My understanding is there is a significant amount of work that has already been undertaken in relation to some of those issues, and it's a question of Conservation Authority in particular and the town staff ensuring that those studies that have been undertaken in the past seasons are appropriate and have covered the areas that were required.
Is there any pressure on the town that would necessitate cutting any corners on these timing questions?
Absolutely not.
Thank you very much. Members of council, do you have questions? Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. Well, I feel more assured about the 1 year study, not like we had before where they did the nesting study for birds in the fall, which showed there were no nesting birds, and no wonder why. This is why I become a little skeptical going forward. With our livable Oakville plan that we have all saluted and said what a great plan it is, does that plan make us in conformity with the places to grow to 2031?
That's correct. The plan that was approved by the Ontario Municipal Board does conform to places to grow and is consistent with the provincial policy statement.
So in fact, the lands you're talking about studying are not required to 2031.
In terms of the need for additional land areas to meet the projected targets, they are not. However, they are within the built-up area, so they would add to the minimum targets for intensification. So that would be consistent, with the growth plan, that additional lands may be considered through amendment to the plan, so long as they're consistent with all of the policies. And these lands were identified, as were other lands such as I'm trying to think of another example. In terms of employment, were the lands that are the Winston Churchill lands that were identified for further study. There's also the D&D lands which were considered as additional lands. So it's a question of they would add to the supply of employment and population. This study will determine the yield from that in terms of additional intensification.
Could be, but they're not, based on what I read in our site specific, the growth areas, there's absolutely no growth marked south of, that is in this area on our livable Oakville plan.
Correct. These lands are not identified as one of the growth areas. They were, however, identified as a special policy area to be considered for potential future redevelopment. So that is the purpose of the study, is to consider the appropriateness of these lands for additional development.
At some point in the future. How much money was put into the capital 10-year forecast for development of these lands?
In terms of the capital forecast, there was, the only funds that I'm aware of that were put in were for the study itself.
Nothing for infrastructure whatsoever?
That's correct.
Thank you. Now, as far as the provincial designation, it's Parkway Belt, correct?
That's correct.
Now, what takes precedence, the province or the region or the town with regard to designations?
The provincial plan takes precedent, and it is identified within our plan as what uses can currently be undertaken in those areas. The majority of the Infrastructure Ontario lands are still within that designation. They have requested removal of those lands from the province, but to date there's been no decision on that request. The other lands, as I indicated, the saw wetlands have been removed, as well as where the regional facilities are located. That was a recent amendment to the Parkway Belt to remove those. They are still, however, under our plan, because that, obviously that request and approval took place after the approval of Oakville. So there's still that requirement to update our plan to reflect that change, and that is an existing use.
But right now, Deerfield is under lease for another 19 to 20 years.
That's my understanding, yes.
And the lands that we have leased, can you expand on the lands that we have leased? What is it, 173 acres or something like that?
Yes, I believe so, and there is a current lease agreement which specifies the continuation of that until such time as there's notification provided, and I believe there's a notification of 6 years for termination of that lease.
What kicks off that? Like, how does this 6 years gives us a lot of time to do anything? And luckily, one of the constituents blew off the dust off an old 1991 report, and probably other than Councillor Robinson and Councillor Bird, not too many people have ever seen it. I know I hadn't, and it became pretty interesting when I started reading about the terms of the lease. Can maybe yourself or legal explain what's going on here? Because when I read it, it makes me think that we don't do anything until, in fact, the province asks us officially that they want to do something with those lands. And I don't think we have been asked that. And then we have 6 years in order to do something.
Yeah, I'll defer to Ms. Huckworth on this. I know there is some confusion around the wording.
With respect to the lease, there's a provision that they can give us 6 years' notice to terminate the lease. They can't give that notice until the lands are either out of the Parkway Belt or the use has changed under the Parkway Belt plan. And the lease lasts until 6 years have expired, or if it's longer, until there's another use permitted on the land. Basically, if at the end of the 6 years, other uses aren't permitted yet, then there's sort of an overholding clause. That doesn't mean that it's not appropriate to figure out what, if, and when. But for those lands, those are the termination provisions.
I thank you very much, because it's hard to read that and completely understand it, but you did a pretty good job. So really, nothing. The 6 year doesn't start until the lands are taken out of the Parkway Belt, that the province would have to initiate themselves. And they've never initiated anything themselves on a Parkway Belt, I don't think, have they?
Yeah, they have a current request.
Okay. When did we get that request? Because that's what the residents have been asking me that had this file in their tickle trunk.
I believe, I'll have to confirm the date. I believe we received that request quite some time ago, and in our response, we did not support the removal. We supported a designation which was similar to our livable Oakville, which was future land to be determined, which was going to be undertaken through the study. So my understanding is we did respond to the province, and as I indicated, they have not responded with an approval or otherwise to date.
So,
from the province's request.
Okay, no, I appreciate what you're saying. So really, we have lots of time at this point. It's not, our livable Oakville will meet our 2031 numbers. And what you're saying is they haven't officially taken it out of the Parkway Belt. And then there's still 6 years in order to get our game together for all the lands in that area. And Deerfield has another 19 years on their lease.
That's correct with respect to a portion of the study area. There is another portion of the study area, however, which is not within the Parkway Belt, which is designated under our plan and the region's plan as urban, and could proceed with an amendment, although it is our recommendation that they proceed collectively through the comprehensive study.
It's the saw wetlands where this been bought by
the Bronte Green Corporation.
By the Bronte Green, which is, painted it green. And it isn't in the Parkway Belt, but it's 53 hectares of the 234 that we're looking at.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? All right, Madam.
Can I?
Sorry, Councilor Bartlett.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with this because this is where I guess I came into the story after hearing with the fingerprints, I guess, of the province of Ontario when the original Ontario Sports Complex, I go back before 1991, was announced with great fanfare along with John Roberts, the then Premier, and this vast Parkway Belt West plan. The two ministers at the time were George Kerr and Jim Snow announced, I don't know if there's anybody else, this wonderful deal, this open space, and that's why I think the designation on this property is sort of consistent with that. It was open space. And quite frankly, the boundaries of what this, of course we know the Ontario Sports Complex never got built, but Bronte Provincial Park did. We also had former, well, I guess our first regional chair, Alan Masson, had meetings with the various landowners on this whole idea of the Parkway Belt West and what was in and what was out and what sort of uses that would be happening there. And the lands in question here, the overriding in a provincial policy statement was Parkway Belt West with private and open space, the one thing. And I think that's what I was surprised that we've overlaid this urban designation, which isn't quite residential, but it's sort of like, I guess, as I'm trying to think, sort of over, and understanding all those policy, I understand the province changed its idea on the Parkway Belt West plan, and it's now, I guess part of that's molded into the Greenbelt plan. But now we're trying to come up with a definition of what's, in layman's terms, the areas that were zoned private open space and urban designation. We're going to do a study to kind of define what sort of development goes in those lands.
Yes, and if I can just clarify, the town's urban designation only applies to the SAW wetlands currently. The intention would be to determine if that needs to be amended in the plan in terms of recognizing the Parkway Belt coming off of some of the properties on page 57 of the report. There is an indication of some properties since Livable Oakville was approved that have actually come out of the Parkway Belt. And those are existing facilities. But the study is intended to look at all of the lands comprehensively to determine if there are additional land use designations that are appropriate and policies for these lands.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of the picking away at what was this Parkway Belt West, so much so that I think they've just abandoned it, and it's now sort of a couple of lines on a map here, and now we're trying to put some verbiage. But it's interesting what you're saying now. None of that was during the hearings and whatever it is. In fact, when we went through in the final report written by former, it was Al, I think Al was a mayor at Oakville, and I know he was the first regional chair, that now we're having Oakville's opinion on a piece of property when we've had it the first time. So we fast forward, I guess nothing, what only constant is change. And that's what you're trying to find again, but I'm just personally really disappointed that we lost the opportunity as originally visioned for the Ontario Sports Complex, and we're going to now peck away what is left of the green space or the Parkway Belt between Oakville and Burlington. But we better do a study to make sure if we're going to start taking pieces out, we do it right and not start a flood. Everybody will want that designation, whatever we put on. So that's my comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Director, I wonder if you could just help the public understand the distinction between the language, the terms of art that were just used. Councillor Bird asked you if the point of the study was to determine the appropriate development on the lands, and your answer said that it was to determine the suitable land use designations. And were you seeking to draw a distinction between development and designation? I mean, there are many land use designations that don't involve development. Could you just amplify that point?
That's correct. There may be, as an example, a significant area of the study that's determined to be added to the natural heritage system. There may be buffer areas that are considered to be added as part of the public open space There would be land use designations to recognize the requirements for town facilities and additional institutional facilities, as well as potential commercial. And in terms of the potential for employment lands, while there may be a land use designation identified for that land, the actual development that would take place would be through additional development applications, such as draft plans of subdivision, rezoning, or site plans for the particular forms of development appropriate along that corridor.
Thank you, Madam Director. Councilor Bird?
Clarify, the type of development that everybody embraced at the time was this idea of an Ontario sports complex, which was, and so therefore the golf courses, those sort of uses, and these open space character, not dissimilar to what we call the master park we've got up north. That was sort of the concept, and there was even talk of Olympic-sized swimming pools and all this sort of things, but we were not really indicating that there was going to be a lot of residential development. That's what I'm trying to say. All of a sudden this urban designation comes in, which then somehow morphs itself into residential, and that's the use that I'm seeing going forward.
Thank you, Councilor Bird. Councilor Elgar?
Yeah, just to shed a little more light on that, and Councillor Burr was around, and Councillor Robinson, in 1991, the council, in fact, leased through Bob Perkins 176.757 acres at $2 a year for 49 years, and they said that it was approved, the conditions of approval, including conditions referring to the lease and everything, and it was done specifically for park purposes. And that'll expire, I guess, in the year 2049 or something. Just to give you a little more clarification.
All right. Any other questions, Council? Madam Clerk, would you call the delegations?
The first delegation is Karen Brock, President of Oakville Green Conservation Association.
Good evening. Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Yes, so I guess you've announced it, Karen Brock with Oakville Green.
Let's see if we can get the microphones to work.
Is it working now? Is that better?
It got better, yeah.
Good, magic. I know there's already been some significant discussion about some of the things that Oakville Green presented in the submission that I made earlier today, but if you'll humor me, and just for the record, I'll read through and I'll answer any questions. Oakville Green.
Actually, if your concern is the record, the written material is part of the record without being read.
Yes.
So please feel free to say as much as you like, but just understand that it's not necessary for record purposes.
Right. And it's quite brief. Oakville Green would like to take this opportunity to signal its interest in the Merton planning study. With a total parcel of the land of 234 acres, this area represents a significant new development area and a significant opportunity to add to Oakville's distinctive natural heritage system. I did also ask for a satellite map to be included, which I think portrays a little bit more clearly than the two maps that were in the package that you received. It does highlight some of the canopy a little bit better than the one green map, and it does highlight the it looks better in color, but yes. Some of the features are a little bit clearer on the map that I did submit. And also I'm going to be referencing the satellite map further. In reviewing the satellite images of the land, we note the area includes important forested parcels that should be preserved, especially land on the eastern border of the site owned by the town of Oakville and the province of Ontario, and a parcel to the east of Bronte Road and the south of Upper Middle Road owned by the province. We're pleased that a key objective of this study will be preserve, enhance, and protect the town and region's environmental features, biological communities, and natural heritage system. As 14 Mile Creek and its tributaries lie within the study area, we're also pleased that another key objective of the study will be to demonstrate a net benefit to the significant population of red-side dace fish within the study area. In looking at the satellite images, there appears to be a great opportunity to reforest areas adjacent to 14 Mile Creek. And I know you'll be consulting with Conservation Halton eventually, and I know there are still some areas that could be left as thicket and open space. But some of the areas of 14 Mile Creek were severely damaged by Halton Region construction several years ago that deposited large volumes of silt in the creek and greatly diminished its capacity as fish habitat. Because of this history, we believe it's of utmost importance to designate large buffers between any new construction and the creek, and to consider planting up these buffers with vegetation before redevelopment begins so that they can effectively screen the creek from the impacts of development. This is especially critical to the west and south of 14 Mile Creek on the Saw-Whet Golf Course lands, as there are limited buffers now. Oakville Green is also pleased that one of the key determinants of the study will be the identification of a natural heritage system, environmentally sensitive areas, open space corridors, valley lands, woodlands, groundwater resources, and other natural features and functions. We expect that the natural heritage system will include not only protection of the significant core features, so obviously in this case the creek and the floodplain, but buffers around them and critical north-south, but especially east-west green space linkages. It's easy with the waterways to have the north-south linkages, but east-west is equally as important, especially with Bronte Creek to the west. In reviewing the satellite images of the area, we see a wonderful opportunity for reforestation and naturalizations of lands that will not be developed, and an opportunity to protect and enhance 14 Mile Creek and its tributaries. Oakville Green realizes that the province wants to divest itself of these lands as quickly as possible, and of course developers are always eager to develop. However, good studies take time, as was previously discussed by His Worship. So I am happy to hear that there will be at least a year, but again, that sounds like it's a tight squeeze. As we found out during the environmental studies for North Oakville, you cannot do nesting bird studies in January and expect them to be accurate, and some studies, such as hydrogeological surveys, need to be done over 4 seasons to give a true picture of the area's water features and functions. Oakville Green urges Council to hold true to the study's stated objectives and determinants, and to ensure that the various studies are given the appropriate time to be properly and completed despite any pressure. In conclusion, Oakville Green looks forward to being part of the public consultation process as this project continues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information. Questions, Council? Councillor Engel? Thank you very much for coming out. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
Next delegation is Mr. Brian Burton.
I understand the next delegation after you, Mr. Burton, welcome, is your wife. I wonder if you'd like to move closer so that you're ready. Welcome, Mr. Burton. Council looks forward to your information. If you would address the microphone, it'd help the public at home hear you.
All right. My name is Brian Burton. I live at 2106 Braes Lane. To make sure everybody understands what we're talking about, this is a drawing from the study documentation. Oh, oops, I guess it goes like this. It's supposed to flash up there, but I don't see it. Okay, your study is proposed to study the Saw-Whet lands and what is called the third line lands. So I am discussing here just the third line lands, not the Saw-Whet stuff, just the third line lands. And for a bit of history on it, as Alan said, in 1991, 177 acres was signed over by lease to the town for 49 years at $2 a year. And this is, this is the land that was signed over for 99 years. You notice the Saw-Whet is not in here, but basically it's this portion of the land, which is the third line land, and all the part that runs all the way up to Upper Middle Road. Now that land was straightforward. We got a 49-year lease, $2 a year. However, there was an exception made to the third line lands, and that exception is this. This land, as it says here, is subject to to the cancellation clause. So the third line lands, which is this little piece in here, can be canceled once the province pulls it out of Parkway Belt and provides 5 years' notice. So they got 5 years from the time it is pulled out of Parkway Belt. The province, Infrastructure Ontario, applied to have it pulled out in 2010. So far, they haven't got it, but presumably the meter will start running on when they can actually get their hands on this property sometime 6+ years in the future. This particular piece here is leased, residential lease, so presumably they can kick the 90-year-old lady out of that house who's been there 37 years. They can kick her out on 6 months' notice. Okay, moving on. Back in the fall, Infrastructure Ontario was back in that piece of property with a backhoe, digging it all up, doing archaeological studies. And the question I kept asking them was, what are you doing? And they kept saying, we're doing just inventory. My question now in hindsight is maybe what you want to do is ask them if they had permission to even enter your land and start digging it up the way they did. So that's sort of my first question. Moving on, has anyone actually seen the study that Infrastructure Ontario has prepared on what they plan to do with the third line lands? My understanding is no one in council has seen this. Now, this document is 700 pages long, so I'm not prepared to, I'm sure you don't want to read it, so I'll just give you the summary of it. Here's the cover, Optimal Use Report. There's the back part, Infrastructure Ontario, completed November 2011. Page 1 of the executive summary says the following. There is 5 pieces of land. The first piece, the residential land, is too close to the poo plant, so we can't do anything about it. I'll jump over to the third piece, which has got 171 acres leased to the town with no cancellation clauses in it. They plan to give it to you. I'm sure you'll love to hear that. That's their plan, to turn it over to the town. The next piece is the Deerfield Golf Course, which has a 20-some-odd year lease left, so they can't do anything with that. And the fifth piece is a regional parcel, which is so chewed up they can't do anything about that. I'd also like you to note that in spite of their denial they're doing anything about it, they hired these people in 2009 to start preparing all this stuff. And what they prepared was 5 land concepts. We're going to put houses in there, we're going to put townhouses in there, we're going to do apartments, we're going to put a church, we're going to do 3 office buildings. What they decided with their best plan of action was to build townhouses. And the townhouse concept was, if you remember from what I had previously, this is parcel 2.2. Sorry, 2.1. Okay, so they are going to put townhouses in parcel 2.1 and 2.2 because it yields the highest residential land values when they sell it. And this is their drawing of what they plan to do with it. And these are all the houses on Braes Lane, which I'm sure are going to be mighty upset about this. You got access to third line, but unfortunately you can only get access going south. Here you got the river, so they can't do anything with that, and you also got another stream coming down here. They can't do anything about that. And I'd also like to point out that this little piece here is Braes Trail Park. All right? That's their preferred plan of development. Now, unfortunately, they can't live with just that access road. They need a second access road. And their plan to put the second access road is here. I won't bother reading to you. It's to go through the park, that's the Braes Trail Park, to go over this 14-mile tributary and access the land. It might be more helpful if I showed you the drawing that they prepared. So they want to come in here, which right now is the park, and they want to come down this stream, which they say is a stormwater management, but it isn't. This is the stormwater management pond. This is a 14-mile tributary. And this is the other 14-mile tributary. Their second plan, if we can't get the town to sell us this piece of property and turn the park into a roadway, is we will come across the North Service Road, we'll come across the Ireland Farms, which was the original Hilton homestead, past the 1858 stone house that's still there, that's, by the way, is a listed property, and across the 14 Mile Creek and get access to it that way. That's their second plan if they can't get the first plan. They're not very confident that they can get that done because they even say, quote, I will read it to you, the second access will be required from either North Service Road or Braes Lane. Neither opinion may be feasible due to the location of the creek near North Service or the existing residential homes on Braes Lane. Further traffic analysis will be required. So basically, that's 700 pages of documents distilled down to 7 minutes. I'll try and also give you some other points that you might not be aware of. They completed the third line, the third stage archaeological study on that property, and they came across the 1832 farmhouse built by Charles Hilton, the original resident of that land. They dug it all up, took nice pictures of the basements and all the stuff that was there, took away a whole bunch of archaeological stuff like buttons and bottles, and then promptly buried it all over again. Second thing you should probably know is third line was the PCB storage site for a number of years. Fourth piece of thing that you might find interesting is that the lease on that parcel of land, 2.1, has a 6-year notice of termination. It's right here in their summary, top of the page. The existing lease on 2.1 has a 6-year notice of termination required by Infrastructure Ontario. The other thing you might want to know is that, according to this document, the next point is Halton is trying to put this land into the 14 Mile Creek Valley ESA. They're trying to get it extended to include the third mile lands. That's parcel 2.1 and 2.2. The province is really opposed to that. So, to round it all up, I would really think what you really want to do is you want to think about this whole thing. You may want to accept this report as tabled, but I think you ought to take that third line lands out of there. Leave Solway in there if you want to table this report, but the third line lands ought to come out. You got 6.5 years from the time they even succeed in getting another parkway built, if they do, to then commence studying the plans. The second thing I think you ought to do is you need to send them a nasty letter saying, what the hell were you doing on my land digging a hole without permission? Redo the studies when you do get permission. And the third thing is, if you can't do anything else, at least don't endorse the damn thing recommendation 2. Don't endorse the part, especially with regard to third line. I am very confident that Halton is going to get these into the ESA. We're certainly going to be hard and very strong. So I think we're too premature and too soon to be even commencing these studies based on all this information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burton.
You're welcome.
Is there something I missed in the staff recommendation, the staff report, that constitutes any form of endorsement or support for the province's plan on that third line parcel that you're concerned about?
The objectives of the Milton Planning Study as provided by staff report be endorsed. That's what I meant. Recommendation number 2 of this study that you want received, recommendation number 2 is that the objectives for the Milton Planning Study as provided by staff report be endorsed. And I'm saying 2 things. I would like you to take the third line lands out of this study, and if failing that, take it out of the endorsement part of this study.
I'm asking you, where in those objectives does it say that an objective is to support the province's plans that you've highlighted for us?
Well, that's the problem. It doesn't. I mean, this thing is so poorly written.
Well, if you go to page 60 and 61, you see the objectives that are being endorsed. And if you would take, I'm happy to take time while you turn to that page.
Well, I don't have a page 61. You'll have to give me
Madam
another
Clerk, could you provide the delegate with a copy?
No, I got the copy, but it's page 8, 9, 10. It's not your page numbering.
Page 10 and 11 if you don't have our agenda page numbers. So at the bottom of your page 10, our page 60, the objectives of the study list begins and it concludes on the following page. I just wonder if is there any objective in there to which you object?
As far as they pertain to studying what they call the third line lands portion of the study, all of it.
Would you just read each one and tell me how in any way, identify for me any objective prejudices your interest in these lands? We have the time.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. My first objective is we're 6 years early. That's the overriding objective.
I'm trying to deal with one thing at a time. The one thing I'm trying to respond to is you said that the objectives were in support of the province's scheme that you illuminated here, and I don't see one here that is, and I therefore ask if you would take the trouble to look at them and identify any that you consider supports the province's goals. I mean, the first one, preserve, enhance, and protect the town and region environmental features, biological communities, and natural heritage system. Does that support this townhouse proposal?
Well, you know, you're going around in a circle here. I mean,
no, I'm trying to deal with one thing at a time. I'm not being circular.
What I got from the province is that they are seeking amendments to the local and regional official plans to amend the zone bylaw, as I gave you. That's what they're seeking to do. And I perceive, maybe incorrectly, but I perceive this document as part of the process of getting the objectives of Infrastructure Ontario in place.
And I would suggest to you that you have incorrectly perceived the purpose of this document.
Okay, explain to me then.
Well, we earlier heard from the planning director while you were here. Perhaps the planning director would like to reventilate this topic.
Through your worship, the intent of this study is to look at the entire area, including the lands that are being referred to as the third line lands, to identify all of the constraints and, given any developable land area that is available, what the appropriate land use and policies would be. And that's to be undertaken in accordance with the objectives that are stated. So there's no predetermined development, there's no predetermined land use designation or policies at this time, just a framework and structure within which to study the lands for that purpose. The third line lands did come into the town, IO came into the town with a request for applications to which it was referred them to be part of the study rather than dealing with site-specific applications at that time.
Okay. And so by way of constraints, for example, the constraints the province itself has identified in its study would be a constraint that we would identify, I assume.
Yes, as it relates to the natural heritage system as well as the built heritage. The Hilton property is a designated property.
And the access as well, I assume.
Yes, and that would also involve MTO given the proximity of the highway corridor.
Right. So thank you very much. I hope that sets your mind at ease more.
No, I'm sorry. I'm still hung up on why the big rush. You got 6.5 years before they can even legally start the studies and start the processes. Why the rush? I mean, if you want to do these studies on the Sawway Golf Course, I fully appreciate the need to do that because it's out of the Parkway belt. This isn't. I mean, why would you want to spend your time and money doing a study on the third lines if the possibility exists that they'll end up in the ESA? Then you've just wasted everyone's time and money. I mean, I'm saying they should be pulled out. You got 6.5 years, put them back in when it's more appropriate to do it.
Thank you very much for your information. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you for coming. When you look at the objectives, with objective number 3, integrate a connect new development where possible with the surrounding communities. That's the one that would hit you, I would think, that you're concerned about.
I don't
It's the third one down, under the objectives of the study,
Going back to page,
on page 10 of the report. When the mayor asks you, what objective don't you like? Would that be
Well,
one you
that's
wouldn't,
the-
that we might be concerned about?
well, that's a big one because you're putting it right through the park, through an existing park, and you're going over an existing river. But, you know, and I thought that was quite clear when it says here, the two major landowners are seeking to commence the comprehensive study required for the area and that the livable plan, potential, area is recognized as an area for potential future development. You know, I mean, that scares me.
Now, what the document you have from information.
Well, I'm just back to this
from
report
IO.
again.
But
Point
you
number
said, I just want to know,
Okay.
and get confirmation from the town if in fact we're reading it, hearing and reading the same things. From the old thing I have is 1991, yours is 2011. Now, what did you say can and can't be done for 6 years? And when you can start doing something?
Well, if I read this thing properly, the third line lands are subject to cancellation clause. And the cancellation clause cannot be pulled until it comes out of the parkway belt and they send you a notification of 6 years. So you got 6 years before they can even go in to start digging the place up and doing the archaeological studies and doing the water studies and doing the wildlife studies. And the presumption that that takes a year or two, you're probably 8 years away from actually seeing any sort of application for development. In the meantime, we'll be working to get it in the ESA. And apparently Halton wants it in the ESA too as part of the 14 Mile Creek Valley lands. If that's the case, you're spending taxpayers' money doing studies that don't need to be done. I mean, I'd say it's unnecessary. It's a simple request, just pull the third line list. I know you don't want to get into a peeing contest with Sawway, I don't blame you, I wouldn't either. But the third lines it isn't necessary to put them in there. Just isn't necessary. I guess that's my biggest objection.
I appreciate that. Now, does legal staff agree, and do they have that report that Mr. Burton has referred to? Like, do we have knowledge of all this information?
It may be that at the appropriate time, a motion to take a session closed to the public to receive advice subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, it might be in order. Generally, our solicitor isn't comfortable giving legal advice in public. Councilor. Councilor Duddick.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Maybe and this isn't directed at you, Mr. Burton, this is more through you to staff, a clarification. When you mentioned the 6-year clock starting before studies could commence, can I get some clarification whether or not that's your interpretation? Because my understanding was that's when you get possession of the lands, and therefore there may be works done prior to that point that would sort of validate the end result.
I think, through you, Your Worship, your understanding of my comments is closer to what the lease says. I was just reviewing some of the lease clauses. The 6 years is when they get possession of the land ownership. And the contemplation that there may or may not be designations in place by the time the 6 years is expired means that this lease contemplated that those applications and studies and planning would ideally take place during the 6-year period and be terminated, if not by the time the 6 years is up, then soon thereafter, and that's when you would transfer it. The clause that I was just looking at was an earlier clause in the lease, which was dealing with the landlord's rights to access to the land under particular terms. They have some rights to go onto the land to do certain things, which, without reading a few more things, just the first few paragraphs look like this is the type of thing which would allow them to onto the land to do testing. The other point is that if you don't allow them onto the land to do testing, they're going to make the same applications without the information which would give you a basis to accept or refuse some of the applications they're making based on the data. in your situation, you would want this to be an informed process with as much information with respect to the historical merits and natural heritage features as possible, whether we do the tests or they do the tests, preferably them at their expense, under our direction and with our control.
Thank you, Mr. Burton, for your information. Madam Clerk, I wonder if you could call the next delegation.
Next delegation is Ms. Diane Burton.
Welcome, Mrs. Burton. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. First of all, I think I should tell you that my mother has leased the house and lands at 1094 3rd Line for the past 36 years. When my parents moved into the house, there were only farmer fields surrounding the house with a split lane road of 3rd Line quite far from the property line. The house was actually built by Roy and Gladys Spears, who operated a market garden business and farmed the 22 acres primarily for strawberries for several years. Mrs. Spears was also a dedicated teacher who taught elementary school for many years in the town of Oakville. The province bought the property from them in the early 70s to be part of the Parkway Belt West. The original vision was to create a sweep of natural lands from 3rd Line and over and under Bronte Road and into Bronte Park lands, which had been recently saved in Burlington. My parents leased the house at this time. It was eventually to become a sports facility for cross-country skiing, so the back acreage could be used for recreational purposes. At the 22-acre farm at 1094 abuts the Fort Two-Mile Creek tributary, which is the locale of endangered fish habitat. These lands meld into the Fort Two-Mile Creek tablelands, and these are the habitat of a vast array of biodiversity. Even the small wetland by the driveway at 1094 hosts snapping turtles and mallard ducks every spring. The backlands harbor deer, foxes, coyotes, various raptors, reptiles, array of butterflies, and until recently, clouds of migrating monarchs would rest in the maple trees before continuing their way south. You are now being asked to start the process to remove the entire 732 acres once reserved as natural lands out of Parkway Belt West. It's the process where it begins. These were established to protect nature lands and the biodiversity within, as well as recreational lands, from massive development. This plan, as it is started and as it's very well planned out, well ahead of time, will include the destruction of these hundreds of acres of greenlands. The species are clinging to their habitat along the echo passages of Bronte Creek, Fort Two-Mile Creek. Once again, we must ask the citizens who care about nature in Oakville, will our Environment First Council protect these lands? I have seen this process fall apart so many times before. You will maybe just vote to receive the study. We will just study it, you may say, even though you know it eventually involves breaking the lease for the Fort Two-Mile Creek Naturelands, signed by the town of Oakville about 15 years ago. You'll then have to look to apply all the weasel clauses and half-truths that will be baked into all of these plans, so they may soon be easily broken or compromised. You will perhaps allow some business and consultant report to supersede the opinions of Conservation Halton on the importance of these lands of critical habitat. Perhaps a $1 billion road plan will continue to chop through these echo passages of the creeks. Every road in Oakville seems to be getting widened, the trees removed, forests sliced through, the wildlife now roadkill or driven off. Even our natural heritage system in the north of Oakville is a shattered remnant of green chunks with roadways and bridges paved through it. I am requesting you to reject the study as it is presented to you. Do not even receive it until you know the details of it and what nature lands will be preserved and what will be taken away by this process and that process as you stand helpless once again before development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Burton, for your information. Questions? I just want to say on behalf of council that I find deeply offensive the insults contained in your remarks and your pessimistic forecasts of how we might perform. But you're entitled to your view, however unwelcome I find them.
Well, I have known since 10, 12 years ago the intent of saving the nature lands in Oakville. And as you know my opinion, this has not been done to the original vision. Roads and bridges all through the natural heritage system, separating it with, yes, we have some conservation land, but there's no continuity. And we have promises that perhaps the natural heritage system areas will be respected. But I truly don't think that vision has been carried out, nor do I expect it will be carried out in these lands.
Thank you for your information. This mayor and this council inherited a setup in North Oakville that gave us the results we have today. And I believe that we've done much better since. Madam Commissioner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to outline for you some brief information. Is that better? Okay. So the region has taken these lands out of the Parkway Belt. They are included in the provincial Parkway Belt plan, but in terms of the regional plan, they are not included in the Parkway Belt.
Can't hear you.
Okay. I'll speak up. I can speak quite loud. They are included in the provincial plan for the Parkway Belt. They've been taken out of the Parkway Belt in the regional plan, so they're identified as urban uses. In response to that, Livable Oakville set aside a specific policy that required us to do a comprehensive study, which is very much in the tradition of how we've been treating studies within Oakville, Livable Oakville certainly being the forerunner of that, trying to understand where the town wants to go in terms of the most appropriate land use, instead of being in a position of responding to development applications. So the Livable Oakville set a policy requirement. Both IO has identified the desire to redevelop the third line lands, as was identified by study work they've been doing. They also had identified the desire to redevelop at some point in time the Deerfield site, and then the Saw Wet property has been bought by the Brawny Green. So this point in time is the time to undertake the study. It gives the town the opportunity to do a comprehensive study on all the lands, develop that evidence base that we need for the most appropriate uses that we want to put on those sites before we're responding to development applications. If you may recall the Creek Bank application that was just up the street on Upper Middle Road, where we were put as a town in the position of having to respond to the studies done by the applicant. This gives us the ability to be able to look at the lands comprehensively, understand their natural heritage context along the river, and be able to develop the most appropriate land uses for the lands as in their entirety instead of on a site-specific basis.
So do I understand you correctly to be saying that removing parcels from the study, or what I would call the head in sand, put your head in the sand strategy, actually weakens the town's position to be protective of our goals and policies?
Yes, I would say that. The comprehensiveness of the study gives us the opportunity to be able to present the best land use.
Thank you. Director.
And I just wanted to add to Commissioner Closey's points that whether it's the current regional plan, the ROPA 38 plan, or the approved Livable Oakville plan, the natural heritage system is improved and intact and maintained in all of those policies. And there is no intention to reduce or diminish that. In fact, the intention through the objectives is to protect and enhance what exists. There's no intention to touch those policies at all.
Councillor Elgar.
Yeah, I just want to make sure there's no misinterpretation or misunderstanding from anyone, but when you go to the Ontario Municipal Board, Map 1 regional structure is number 1 in key to every other map. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
In the regional official plan, Map 1 regional structure, Parkway Belt is definitely on that map. You agree?
On the current approved regional plan,
And on the new ROPA 38 attachment, MMAH decision attachment number 3, it is also on.
No, the Parkway Belt is not on ROPA 38.
Well,
I have,
then I think we better be
I
very
have a
sure,
copy.
because my copy here that I received from the region shows the MAP 1 regional structure,
yes.
and the MAP 1 regional structure shows Parkway Belt on it.
And my MAP 1 regional structure shows urban.
Urban area, but dotted red line Parkway Belt. Take another look. Parkway Belt West plan boundary. It's on there, I guarantee you.
Councillor, I wonder if this isn't the point where you want to consider moving into a closed session.
Well, no, but I think in the open session, I think we can get this cleared up. It's a public document.
Sure. Commissioner.
If I could help in that, the Parkway Belt, you're quite right, is shown on a dash line in the regional plan because that's the provincial plan that's in place. But when the region undertook its last official plan, even prior to ROPA 25, they had identified the lands that had Parkway Belt purposes that they wanted to maintain as Parkway Belt. It did not include these lands. That was carried forward in ROPA 25 and in ROPA 38, and that's why they're designated as an underlying designation for an urban with a notation that it has a Parkway Belt designation under the provincial plan.
Urban area, color-wise, but red dotted line around that whole area we were talking about tonight. Correct?
That's right, because it denotes the provincial plan. But the
Provincial takes
underlying
precedence over region. Yeah. Oh, boy, your microphone's bad.
The underlying designation that the region is suggesting is urban.
I'm not arguing that. Yeah, that's right. It is, underlying is urban. Above everybody else is Parkway Belt West plan. It's on here. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, you had mentioned that this was initiated at the request of IO that we do this comprehensive study of the entire area, correct? Is that, no?
Just through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Duddick. There were requests made originally by IO for site-specific applications to which staff had had discussions to suggest that those, in accordance with the policies, would be deemed premature until such time as the comprehensive study was done. And at the same time, the Saw-Wet lands were sold to Bronny Green, who then had discussed with the town the process of developing their lands, and the recommendation to them was that we would prefer to have those lands considered through the comprehensive study. So it was the town's request for the comprehensive study to address individual applications.
Okay, thank you very much.
I would like to ask a councillor to assist me with a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of receiving advice subject to solicitor-client privilege and communications for that purpose. Councillor Duddick, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Madam Clerk, would you arrange the chamber for a session closed to the public?
Should we add C1 to that, seeing how we're going to closed session? Should we add C1 to that, just to cover closed session time?
Well, if you'll think about what I said, it covers everything. All right, I'll now call to order this resumption of the public session of this meeting of the Planning and Development Council. Council's met in a session closed to the public for the purpose of receiving advice subject to solicitor-client privilege and the communications necessary for that. We're on item 5. The chair recognizes Councillor Elger.
Yes, first I'd like to get a motion to go beyond 10 o'clock.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries.
And I have a motion that I would like to present to council. And my motion is very simple. I would ask that we receive this report and not take any action, further action of planning studies at this time. And the reason for me saying that is I feel this, before us, the planning studies for this area are premature. We have an approved livable Oakville plan. That plan, in fact, has been approved by the region, the province. We have identified where our numbers. We will meet the places to grow right up until 2031, and I see no need to look at these lands for population growth at this time. It's very well recognized in our town official plan that the Parkway Belt does exist. It's on Schedule A1 of the urban structure. It mentions Parkway Belt. Built boundary urban center it's on the land use schedules boundaries. Not to know Parkway Belt is in our official plan by anyone who happens to have just purchased a golf course, I'd be very surprised. And since we are meeting all our objectives, there is no reason that we should be looking at doing anything with this lands other than what we're doing now. Golfers continue to golf and have a great time, and the natural areas for everyone else to enjoy, and I'm hoping council will support that. I'm not saying at a future date we shouldn't do the studies, because it will come a time, but not at this time. I thank you.
Any other speakers? All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Those opposed?
Recorded vote.
All right. Those in favor of the motion, please rise to be named. Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Berg, Councillor Demoff. Those opposed? Councillor Khan, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Mayor Burton, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Johnston. The motion fails. I'd entertain another motion. Did I see a hand? Councillor Knoll.
I'll move the staff recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. It's moved by Councillor Knoll. Are there any changes wanted? Councillor Elgar.
Your Worship, if in fact it's going to, obviously it didn't do too well on my side here, if in fact Councillor Knoll is moving it, I would ask for a few modifications to the objectives of the study, in that I would like it mentioned about protecting wildlife corridors also. It's
In
not
objective
there.
1?
Sorry?
In objective 1?
Yes.
Any
I would
others?
like protecting wildlife corridors to be in there. Would also like that we should be looking at connecting east-west corridors between ESA number 10 and ESA number 12. Number 10 is your Bronte Creek, and 12 is the 14 mile.
Okay. Any others? That's in number 1 also, I assume. Do you want to make any changes to number 3?
Well, I'm wondering how we do that. Integrate and connect. I know that was what Mr. Burton was talking about, where they were looking at coming through town lands to have a road. Can staff help us with this?
You could conceivably say, determine appropriate integration and connection of new development where it is possible with the surrounding communities. If you...
Without negatively impacting surrounding communities.
No, I think you're well, I don't know. Let's look for legal advice here. You want objective criteria. Director?
I would just suggest that, the last statement about where not negatively impacting, the intent of the integration and connection is to connect to the existing community, and it's never intended that integration and connection is seen as a negative thing. So the intent of the policy from here and in livable Oakville is in relation to complete communities, where integration and connection, if there is to be development, is to be achieved. It's not seen as a negative. So I would just put that forward as the intent of this objective and policy is a positive influence for the planning.
Perhaps staff can, if they run a road through an existing park, that I don't think would be seen as being a positive to many people.
Commissioner.
With the words determine appropriate, I think that gives you the latitude to determine what is the appropriate linkage of that community, the new community, to the existing. So in that way you are protecting the existing community while allowing for some integration where it's appropriate.
Okay. Guess we'll see.
Councillor Knoll, are these changes agreeable to you?
think that these bring great value to this resolution.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor then? Opposed? That carries. All right, that brings us to item number 6, which is the notice of intention to demolish at 87 Dundas Street East. I'll look for a motion. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd be pleased to move that along with an addition to that recommendation that I believe members of council have a copy on their desk, but that Heritage Planning staff be directed to prepare a report regarding the Heritage Register, which outlines the current process for adding and removing listed properties from the register by the town and by other municipalities, and which examines strategies and options related to dealing with listed properties on the register in the future, which can be considered through the Heritage Work Program. The reason for incorporating this, we've had considerable discussion at the Oakville Heritage Committee regarding this list and some of the demolitions that have occurred as a result of removing them for this properties of interest. And given that the Oakville Heritage Committee cannot direct staff, Councillor Giddings and myself offered to bring it forward in a formal process so that staff can provide the appropriate report, not only to Oakville Heritage, but also to council and the public.
Councillor Knoll.
I certainly support the both motions. I have just a question of staff before we vote, and that is, first of all, a comment I really enjoy, and I think it brings great value to the history of this town, the reports that come back from staff detailing the history of the properties that we're dealing with. So there's a really comprehensive and interesting chronological study on this particular property. So my question is to staff, these generally get buried, sorry if that's a negative term, but these reports generally get buried in agendas and don't really see the light of day unless somebody researches them again, but there's some excellent information in there. Is there a way, or do we have plans, or do we now, and I've missed it, have a place to publish this information somewhere on our website or somewhere so that people who have an interest in the history of some of these properties and the photographs can actually access them easily and readily?
Through your worship, to Councillor Noel, I don't believe that's our current practice now, but we certainly could look into doing that. I think that's an excellent idea.
I think that in light of the fact that some of these properties disappear permanently, and there's so much work put into these reports, which are excellent, I think it'd be great if the staff could find a way to do that and let people know that it's there.
We have a confidential discussion. Excuse me. We have a confidential discussion item in the agenda of the council, and look for a motion. Councillor Duddick.
I'll move the recommendation for C1.
The public might hear if I turn the mic on. We can now make public the recommendation that we've just passed, which is that staff be authorized to take steps in the appeals of Burlington OPA 55 and the planning process related to the Dundas Tremaine area of Burlington, consistent with the report from the legal department dated November 8th, 2012. All right, so the next thing, that's yours, is the advisory committee meeting minutes. Councillor Giddings. Councillor Giddings moves receipt. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. A motion to rise and report to council would be in order. Councillor Khan, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. I rise and report the committee of whole has met, and the committee of the whole has met and made recommendations on public hearing item 1, discussion items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, advisory committee minutes item 7, and the confidential discussion item C1, as noted by the clerk. A mover and seconder for this report. Councillor Johnston, Councillor Khan, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Council, is there new business of an emergency, congratulatory, or condolence nature? Thank you. A mover and seconder for consideration of the bylaw would be in order. Councillor Khan and Councillor Grant, thank you. This is authority for bylaw 2012-108, the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of a meeting of council. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. That completes our agenda. Thank you for your time and attention. It's been good working with you. We are adjourned.